Should you really be eating fiber or not? Well, for some people, it does make their gut feel better, and on the other side, it can make you feel much, much worse. So pay close attention in this lesson because I'm going to be showing you what fiber actually is and what it's really doing inside of your gut. I'm going to explain the arguments that are for or against fiber, so think the plant versus animal-based conversations. We'll talk about whether it's either helping or harming your gut and whether or not you should be eating fiber at all. But before we get into this, I do want to mention that as a gut specialist, I work in some of the worst gut diseases from IBS to Crohn's and colitis. And I'm not actually in one camp or the other because I've seen both plant-based and animal or carnivore actually work for people. And in this episode here, I'm going to be explaining why that happens and what's going on to make fiber either help you or harm you. So first things first, what is fiber? Well, fiber by itself is a non-digestible carbohydrate, and of course it's found in plants, your fruits, vegetables, grains, and legumes. But there are really two types of fiber. You have what's called your soluble fibers, and then you have your insoluble fiber. So this means insoluble is a scratchy, rough stuff. It doesn't absorb or dissolve in water. Think like cabbage, oat bran, popcorn, whole grains, things like that. If you stirred them in a glass of water, they just wouldn't break down. Your soluble fiber, on the other hand, is soft. It either dissolves in water or absorbs water, and it can form like a gel inside of your gut. So think things like apples, sweet potatoes, beans, that type of stuff. But there are, of course, many fruits and vegetables contain both types of fiber. So that would be a sweet potato with the skin on or an apple with the skin. You have the waterlogged apple on the inside and the rough, tough skin on the outside. So that's both insoluble and soluble. But here's the thing. As a human being, you actually cannot digest fiber. Like at all. You don't make the enzymes to break it down. You can break down carbs, fats, and proteins, but you do not break down fiber. In fact, the only way you actually break it down is by fermenting it inside of your gut by your gut microbiome. Now, this microbiome is a huge ecosystem of bacteria, parasites, and fungus that lives inside of your gut. Now, it's about 2 to 3%, give or take, of your body weight. For the average person, that's 3 to 5 pounds of just bacteria. And most of it sits right in your large intestine where it attaches to your small intestine. That's where most of your fermentation happens, where a lot of these fibers get actually broken down. So the question we have to be asking is, if you as a human being, you don't make enzymes to break down fibers like you do carbs, fats, or proteins, so why do some people say that we need fiber? And why do some people say that we don't? So we're going to talk about both arguments here so you can have the evidence for yourself. So the pro-fiber argument is saying that fiber is good for you because it cleans your intestines, number one. They say it ferments these probiotics or these fibers into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. They're great for your gut. They help with manage inflammation. It's food for your colon cells. It works for your immune system because it's an amazing, amazing substance. They say fiber also binds onto toxins or bile acids, where a lot of toxins will accumulate inside of bile. It says it can capture that. They say fiber feeds your bacteria, which leads to a healthier gut microbiome, that ecosystem of bacteria inside of your gut. They say meat by itself also produces toxic byproducts, which might even biomagnify. This means accumulation, supernatural levels. It can accumulate environmental toxins in the meat or the fat of the animal. Therefore, when you eat the animal, you eat more toxins. So that's the pro-fiber, almost anti-animal side. But the other side of the conversation, point for point, looks like this. They say you need fiber to clean your intestines, but your intestines actually shed their own lining every 2 to 3 days. So you don't actually need to clean it yourself. You don't necessarily need fiber to turn into short-chain fatty acids. Your body can use protein to create those. They are saying that it binds onto toxins, fiber, it helps you clear out these toxins and bile acid, but a high-fat diet promotes good motility and bile flow, which eliminates toxins anyways. Then we talk about the bacteria. Your gut microbiome ultimately can thrive and in some cases even produce new microbes or colonize new microbes from a carnivore-based diet. We've seen that in small-scale studies as well. The microbiome data we know is skewed. And then the argument as well is that plants are toxic. Plants contain things like pesticides and industrial chemicals and themselves produce toxins. So in one camp you say we need fiber, it cleans you, it's non-toxic, and it's good for your microbiome. On the other hand, we say plants are toxic, you don't need them for your microbiome, and your bowel cleans itself. So what do we have to really look at here? Well, we know there's a lot of pro-plant advocacy out there. So let's talk about the data on the animal-based side. There's a 2021 study that drew the conclusion that those who ate high quantities of meat had poor gut microbiomes. That means they measured all their gut bacteria and decided that these microbiomes, these communities, were weaker, they were more pro-inflammatory or less optimal for human health. But the study was seriously flawed, and we see this over and over again in the anti-meat studies. In this one, they asked 1,425 participants to self-report on eating habits and dietary factors. And the problem is, self-reporting isn't super accurate to begin with, right? And then what they did is they had people self-report in a population where some of them had a healthy gut, some already had irritable bowel syndrome, many had Crohn's or colitis, they had bowel diseases. Well, IBS, Crohn's, colitis, these bowel conditions alter your microbiome independently of food anyways. So what we're saying is look at the food you're eating, look how bad your microbiome is, without taking into the factors as to why your microbiome got there, they just draw the correlation. So in inaccurate self-reporting data, we're making correlations. But the problem is we have clinicians using this as law. There are many studies that do this. They claim that protein is bad, and they show these anti-inflammatory or inflammatory markers that are rising with increased consumption of meat. Look how bad protein is. Look how much your inflammation goes up. But the protein they're consuming is like a Nestle Boost drink where the first two ingredients are corn syrup and canola oil. No wonder you're getting sick. On the other hand, we do see some great data that's coming from companies like Zoe, who actually go to a lot of these hunter-gatherer tribes, see what they're eating, measure their microbiomes, and go, look how amazing they are. So the question is, why are our microbiomes such a mess in the first place? And that's a conversation for another time. But largely it's due to industrialization. Problem is, we live in a modern world where our entire ecosystem, our environments are not compatible with our biology. We're consuming junk food and fake processed foods and chemicals and artificial ingredients, and all of these things are damaging our microbiomes, which I believe is damaging our ability to digest fiber, which is why the carnivore diet is so popular in the West, but it's more mixed in other parts of the world where they still have hunter-gatherer tribes, because they can digest the fibers, because they have the gut bacteria to do it, but in our side of the world, our industrialization has killed the bacteria that we need to ferment those fibers in the first place. Now, since you're here watching this video right now, it's likely that fiber either helps your gut, it actively harms your gut, like when you eat it, you feel worse, or you're still trying to figure it out. I'm not sure what's making me worse, what's not. So let's talk about some things, why fiber would make your gut feel worse. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, we know that fibers, when you're consuming excess amounts of them, remember, we're talking about your gut microbiome. If it's making you feel worse, then you might actually be feeding, we're going to say the bad guys. I use air quotes for bad guys. You might have an overgrowth of bacteria, which in large amounts become toxic, and the dominant species eats first. So when you're feeding fibers or prebiotics into your gut and you're getting gassy and bloated and you're farting, it smells really bad and your stools stink and you're having diarrhea, constipation, you might be feeding bad overgrowths and contributing to the problem. Another problem that we see is because, remember, those microbes, they take the food you consume and they ferment it into what should be benefits for you. The problem is if you have bad guys that are eating first before the good guys, you can over-ferment. Now, fermentation is a process. We talked about how you don't make enzymes to break down fibers, but your gut microbiome ferments these fibers into beneficial things for you. Fermentation should be happening in the large intestine. Okay, it looks like this. Now, that's where fermentation should be happening. Most of it right here where your small bowel actually joins it. The problem is so many of us have dysfunctions, we have parasitic infections, we have inflammation, poor diets, high stress. All these things contribute to dysfunctional valves, which means these microbes that live in your large intestine end up backflowing into your small intestine. The problem with this is that fermentation is supposed to happen in the large intestine. You have bacteria there designed to do this. You have a double thick cell wall in your large intestine. It's only a single cell in your small intestine. Plus your large intestine has two mucus layers. It's kind of like having two socks in your shoe to protect you from blisters. Your small intestine only has one. Your large intestine has two. So fermentation happens in your small intestine. We call this condition SIBO much of the time. That's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And so you can feel really bad if you're fermenting in the wrong areas. We also know that there's imbalances here. That's what SIBO is. It's an overgrowth. So we're feeding the bad guys. And it could be producing an overproduction of these short chain fatty acids like acetate or propionate instead of one called butyrate, which is one of the most important ones for your gut. This imbalance of fatty acids being produced leads to increased inflammation. Now we have highly inflamed bowels. On top of that, now you're eating fiber and it's running through your gut and it hurts. It's like sandpaper on aggravated, irritated tissue. And so there's that physical abrasion in your gut where fiber can hurt. On top of that, if you already have inflammation, you have motility issues, you have microbiome or gut bacteria issues, this can change your body's balance of water. So you might not be binding enough water or binding too much water, contributing to the imbalances. Now you've got constipation or diarrhea, and fiber now makes you worse. So the question that has to be asked, what about those who are eating fiber and they're feeling really good? Well, simply put, it's quite the opposite. Instead of feeding the bad microbes, you might actually be increasing all the good guys. My marker's dying here, but you get the idea. You might actually be feeding the right microbes, contributing to better balance, colonizing and correcting your microbiome, which leads to better byproducts. Now, if you're feeding those beneficial microbes, remember we talked about the imbalance can produce imbalanced short-chain fatty acids. We'll call them SCFA. But if you're consuming the appropriate amounts of these guys, and you're getting fibers in that are helping you balance them, then you end up having a better outcome. If you're consuming fiber and your bowel's not super inflamed, it may actually improve your irregularity. So you go, wow, I don't really poop very often, I poop too much, but when I eat fiber, I feel really good, because in your system, this particular fuel is being used properly to promote better balance. We also know that the fiber, if it's working well for you, we talked about it binding onto toxins. Did you know that bile, it's made in your liver, it's that stuff if you have an empty stomach that your dog might vomit up or you might vomit up, it's like this greeny, yellow, really bitter, sludgy fluid. It's made inside of your liver and it goes into your gallbladder and your body actually, they inject it into your small intestine. This bile helps you emulsify fats. And what that means, if you think of it like turning fat, that slick oil, into water. So your body can break it down and absorb it really easily. The problem is, up to 95% of this bile that your body makes actually gets reused. It's expensive to make. So instead of making new bile every time you eat food, your body just reabsorbs it, sends it back to the liver, goes back into the gallbladder, goes back into the small intestine, and it goes and reabsorbs. And your body cleans it out. So if you're somebody who tolerates fiber well, as that bile is reabsorbing, those fibers can be taking toxins out of the bile, so you don't reabsorb the toxins with it. So you're getting cleaner bile. It's like a filter system for you. On the other hand, fermentation in the right areas. We talked about fermentation happening in the large intestine versus the small intestine. If you're fermenting in the large intestine where you should be, because your microbiome is healthier, then that fermentation can actually lower the pH and inhibit the overgrowth of what's called pathogenic, that means bad, bacteria in your gut. So the question we ultimately want to ask is, should you be eating fiber or not? Well, my conversation, and this is why I talk to all my clients, is that it depends on your gut. It depends on your microbiome. If you cannot eat fiber right now, don't introduce it or keep it very small. Maybe you want nuts and seeds. Maybe you have to soak them. Maybe you have to cook your fruit. Many people can do well by slowly introducing fiber into their diet in small amounts, especially cooked or even fermented, because that pre-fermented process saves your body a lot of fermenting. So you get those good probiotics, you get these broken down fibers, they're easier to digest and absorb. But here's my opinion. Do I think everybody needs fiber? No. There are amazing clinicians out there, millions of people worldwide now using the message they spread, like Paul Saladino. He was more carnivore, he's now since not. But Dr. Sean Baker, full carnivore. Dr. Anthony Chafee, full carnivore. Now Ben Azadi, you can look him up here on YouTube, good friend of mine, who's actually done a lot of experimenting. And he went carnivore in all the lab tests. He took his stool samples, he measured his microbiome before doing this experiment and after. He went full carnivore, nothing but meat, salt, and water for 90 days. And everybody told him it's going to get worse. His microbiome actually improved. He had better bacteria and more commensals. These are keystone necessary bacteria in his gut after 90 days. So the conversation is, should we be eating seasonally? Things don't grow in the winter. Is the wintertime the time to eat meat and the summertime the time to eat plants? If you tolerate it. But this is what it comes down to. If you are tolerating it well, if your body handles fiber well, then I say go for it. Eat them, because they're going to be helping you. If your body isn't handling fiber well right now, you need to address your inflammation and fix your gut microbiome before you go adding fibers in. Or if you can tolerate a little bit, add them in a little bit at a time by bit by bit until you feel comfortable eating them. Now, as a gut specialist, I do eat some fiber. I'm a good guest. If I go to my in-laws, I'll have some soup. If I make soup for my wife, she likes soup in the winter, I'll make some of that. I eat a lot of berries. I eat a lot of fruits. I don't eat a lot of vegetables, and I eat a lot of meat. And that's what makes my gut feel really good. But measuring my gut microbiome, there are some imbalances that I've dealt with my entire life because I was handed down genetically. I shouldn't say genetically, but I had inherited a less than optimal microbiome from my mom and from my dad, from the household I was in. I ate a lot of poor foods growing up, which damaged my gut. And it may never recover to the way it could have been optimally had I been barefoot, naked, running around on a healthy farm. So the idea is it's an individual conversation that you have to try and test for yourself. And the reality is there's no right or wrong. With fiber or without fiber, your body can do everything it needs to, as long as it has the microbes to do it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm going to see you on the next episode.